So wait just a minute or two. Okay, I think everyone who should be attending the webinar has probably jumped on by now, so let's get things underway. So welcome guys, welcome to our webinar from A2K Technologies, as well as association with Ideate software here in regards to the BIM Link and the Ideate apps. So quick little introduction, about the, not the course. Here we go. So a quick little introduction about myself. So I am your presenter today. My name is Phillip Corbett. I'm one of the technical consultants from A2K Technologies up here in Brisbane. I am a certified professional Revit structures as well as Bluebeam. Prior to taking the role at A2K, I was a structural draftsman in Revit for quite a number of years. So, and I've been working as a technical consultant into the AE industry now for about 2 years. So that's a little bit about myself. Now, a little bit about the Ideate apps themselves and obviously BIMLink. So the Ideate apps are here to decrease the time spent on common Revit tasks and they also increase the accuracy of the BIM data within the Revit models. So the tools in which we'll be going through today are the Ideate QuickSelect, the Ideate SmartDelete, the Ideate XRay, SpellCheck, and then we're also going to jump into more or less the QAing side of it, which, the SpellCheck falls into, as well as the SheetManager, Align, Clone, and View Creators. So one of the common questions that is usually asked is, why is the Ideate apps have come about? And their approaches in regards to, well, what are sort of the problems we're trying to solve here? So the guys have noticed that there's quite a few workflow gaps within the Revit system naturally as it comes out of the box. So the Ideate software here is to help to fill some of those gaps, for instance, with the quick select, renumber, and delete in there. So now one of their examples is in regards to the project browser and how it can be quite difficult to find items. So the SheetManager is one of those ones we can actually use to help approach that scenario. And in that particular tool itself, it allows us to see all our particular views, our sheets, and help put these together rather quickly, as well as going through and create new views. Okay, so we can set up rules in the background when we're creating our views to help us minimize that time and having to, right-click, duplicate a view and rename it. So they've approached it very well in that regards from a SheetManager and view creation. And ultimately aligning all those views at the end of the day on your sheets as well. So you get a consistent approach rather than have to switch on a grid guide and try and align those views up manually. So it's a really, really neat package, the SheetManager, in regards to the align and view creation as well. So there's also the renumbering tool in there, which offers a quicker solution in renumbering the items and changes that occur to an actual document. So there's always a bit of a problem when something changes in a project, doors removed from a particular architectural file, or maybe even columns from the structural environment. And renumbering's always been a quite cumbersome process. So we'll be going through today very quickly and sort of going through the workflow involved and how to speed up that current process if you were to actually do it manually. So that is the renumberer there. There's also the other question on why something has been deleted from a project and why has it actually been deleted is usually the question as well. So we've noticed that in Revit there's a lot of warnings that pop up, and evaluating those warnings and even understanding those warnings can be quite difficult sometimes because they're usually quite a bit vague. So the SmartDelete has been put together to give us a bit more of an insight of the relationship between Revit elements and how they actually interact. So we'll be going through that to sort of identify, well, how can we use that in relation to our project? what happens and what sort of warnings will actually display for us, and also help build our knowledge up in regards to why has elements been removed from my project based on some of the procedures that we do. So it's a very neat tool. And another problem that we can actually incur as we're using Revit there is how to identify specific elements that are not usually haven't displayed in the view whilst you're actually placing it. Okay, so the X-ray allows us to dive a lot deeper in the background and review as to why the element hasn't shown. So the particular tool runs about 55 different ways in telling us, well, why hasn't that element displayed as I've actually placed it? So for instance, you might be trying to place a column in a particular view. You've placed it, it's giving you a warning, hey guys, it's not actually showing up, but you're not sure as to why, because it could be things like view ranges might be a particular instance, the category might be turned off, it could even be a filter in the background that's holding columns from the particular project. So we'll jump into that X-ray during this presentation as well to sort of help understand how that tool can be efficient. And then we also have our quality control tools in there. So our SpellCheck, pretty obvious in there, very handy tool. It not only just goes through the drawings, but you can get it to go through every single drawing in your project or specific views if you just want to review a couple of GAs. And also on top of that, it can jump into schedules as well, which as we know, reviewing of schedules can be quite cumbersome. So if we can increase or save time in having to review those, very, very important. So the other quality tools in there, the other very important quality tools in there is the ability to actually lay out the sheets and the views, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, using our SheetManager, and how we can reduce our time because it can be quite difficult to actually do so. So that's the collection of tools provided by Ideate software here is to focus on the Revit productivity and effectiveness. So I'm just going to jump ahead to the next slide. So here were some of our workflow problems I was just discussing. So the very first tool I'm going to jump into, guys, is the Ideate QuickSelect and how we can use this tool to leverage in Revit here. So I'm just going to minimize this particular slide for a quick second. Oops, sorry, guys, I probably shouldn't have had that open in the background. And I'm going to open up a particular file in here. Okay, so this particular file, just a quick brief background. It's just a simple little structural building, nothing too out of the way. So I'm just going to close that view down here, and I'm going to have a look at how we use this particular QuickSelect tool. Okay, now, by the way, guys, as I go through and quickly demonstrate how these tools are actually used, any questions, feel free to put them into the little chat dialog box. Myself and Richard from Ideate software are here to help answer those questions. And at the very end of the session as well, guys, I'll jump in that chat dialog box and hopefully can answer as many as I can. So please don't hesitate. So the Ideate QuickSelect, guys, just for your reference, when you do install the tools, they do install with their own little tab at the very top of Revit over here. So currently I've jumped into Revit 2018.2, and you can see those Ideate software packages are all up the very top here in that particular tab. Now that's the same for Revit 2017 as well, so you have your own tab. Now if anyone here is running Revit 2016, because the software does support the 3 different versions, similar to Autodesk, it actually will be found underneath the add-ins tab, okay? So it will be in a separate spot. But if you're running 17 or 18, as I am right here, guys, it will have its own tab. So let's jump straight into the tools. So we're going to go firstly straight into the QuickSelect. So fire out this tool straight away, you will notice it has picked up a lot more categories than just the standard Revit categories that you might find, just for instance here, underneath VG. Okay. So back on track, we do have a lot more categories we can identify within QuickSelect. So it is going that one extra layer deeper. Now that is looking currently at the overall project. I can reduce the amount of information I'm trying to display here in regards to results from just the entire project down to the current view I'm seeing, or even my current selection if I had a few items selected in there. So you can really get down to the nitty-gritty when it comes to this. So now looking at this particular feature I have in front of me, There's also a search functionality in here as well. So to help identify some objects that we may be interested in finding, for instance, here I'm going to type in the word concrete. Okay, so you can see straight away it's reduced the amount of items that it's actually going to look for that contain, whether it's the name of the particular element, it could be even text within that particular view to help reduce how many options we actually see in here. So as you can see, it's picked up some model elements. You can even see it's picked up a couple of fill regions in here as well. And quite neat as well, it's also picked up a couple of times that the word concrete has been used within a piece of text. So for instance, if I was to double click on that, it's actually going to take me to the actual view where that text is actually occurring. And you can actually see that the word concrete is actually displayed in that text node over here. Now, one quite neat feature about actually using this QuickSelect is it's not actually restricting you to be stuck within that dialog box, okay? So it sort of is running almost independently and off to the side of Revit. So as you're going through, and you might, for instance, say, I need to change that to a different value in there, it'll actually go through and it is live and update that within your QuickSelect as well, okay? So it's very interactive, as you can see. It takes you to the view, and for instance, you can even go there and switch between those two different views very, very quickly and navigate in there. So now one other thing, it fortunately hasn't actually showed me in there, is it can actually take you to your sheet as well. So at the moment, I might actually have not have the update. Sorry, guys. It will actually, just for your reference, guys, if these views are placed on the sheet, as you can see in here, there is an option to right-click in there and go Open Sheet. I do apologize. It looks like my software is not doing that this morning, but it can help you also navigate between your sheets, between your drafting views of where all those different concrete, for instance, that piece of text has actually occurred, okay? So it's another very great way to help identify, obviously, where it occurs and help update it. Now, another great little feature about using this particular tool as well is the fact that you can go through and help basically identify all the instances. So just as an example here, I'm going to backspace that all. I might have received say for instance, this is a structural project in here. I might have received a comment from the structural engineer saying in regards to my structural columns, I might have to up the sizes, okay? So designs come back and realize that the columns are a little bit too small. So rather than having to go through to the individual view, find those individual columns and update them, I can actually do it through this dialog box very, very quickly, okay? So if I was to go through and find the structural columns, maybe, for instance, all the 530 UBs that are actually being used, I can very quickly highlight them using this QuickSelect and change them over. Maybe, for instance, they're dropping down in size, just as a bit of a change there. And that will go through, and rather than you have to identify them, right-click, select all instances, or if it's only specific to that current view or a particular zone, you can help identify those a lot easier. And if I also have a quick look at my GA now, you can see that's all updated, okay? So it's another alternative to having to go through and use that type selector. So that there is the QuickSelect dialog box. So as I said, it's a very, very easy way to help search where items are actually being used, help change items around. And you'll notice it also can be running at the same time as you're actually going through and reviewing that project. Now, one additional ability it actually has, which is really, really handy, is the ability to actually go through and find any CAD links that are actually in the project, okay? So at the moment, I'm going through, okay, that doesn't seem to be working this morning, but unfortunately, I think it's because I'm missing an update here, but it does have the ability where a CAD file has actually been placed in a particular view and possibly actually hidden. Unfortunately, mine's not working this morning, but you do have the ability, if you go through and double click onto it, we'll actually go through and find the view that's actually been hidden in and turn it on there for you. Okay, so not only is it just looking for elements that they can actually visually see, it is digging in that background and searching for elements that possibly could be hidden. So, and as we know, CAD files can be quite dangerous in Revit as well. So if you've got another way in which we can help review this, that is perfect. So So that there is the QuickSelect. So as you can see, guys, it gives us the ability to quickly navigate within the Revit scene due to all the features and being able to double click as well. Okay, so I'm going to close that one down. Now, the next tool we're going to have a quick look at is the SmartDelete tool. So working our way down the Ideate apps over here. Firing this one up here. So as it kind of prompts you and tells you right now, helps you analyze and select elements before they are deleted. So it's also a very good reviewing tool as well, as actually I've been finding. So as we know, it's always a bit of a problem in helping identify as to why something is being removed from my project due to maybe a certain instance, or another person particularly working the project may have gone through and accidentally deleted an element, and that element may have had hosted elements to it. Okay, so this tool is very handy in helping identify, well, what would be the result of possibly deleting maybe, for instance, a floor or a column in this particular project. Okay, so it's a very, very handy tool, and it gives us quite a few different reasons, or gives us a list of possible outcomes. So just to show you how that can actually work is I'm going to go through and select this slab here, and I'm going to come back and fire up this SmartDelete. And in doing so, it's given me a list, a bit of a hit list of dependents that will be affected if this floor was to be deleted. So as you can see, there's currently a dimension tucked onto this. There's fabric, there's a floor, there's even a tag, and there's slab edge associated to it. So if I was to remove this floor currently, it looks like I'll be removing in excess of 50 different dependents to this one floor. So it's a very, very handy tool in helping validate if it was to be removed, or what are some of the repercussions of it, okay? Now, I'm only currently looking at the individual element right now, but there's absolutely no reason why I couldn't go through, select the entire project in here, fire up the QuickDelete, sorry, the SmartDelete, and go through each of the different categories, or even each of the individual instances, if I really wanted to help identify, maybe for instance, if I was to remove the grid, what would actually happen? What would be the repercussion of that particular delete? Now, if you are happy with deleting, maybe for instance, this stair over here, as you can see, it's going to delete these particular instances. If I go through and uncheck all, sorry, before I do that, turn on that and hit delete, it'll go through and it still has a delete function in there as well, okay? So it's probably definitely one of those workflows to introduce as a part of more of a smarter approach and just simply deleting an object, okay, guys? So as I said, multiple objects at the same time. Yes, you can review the individual instance if you wish, and it's going to tell you exactly what will be removed if you were to hit the delete button right there. So another very handy tool that the Ideate team have put together here. So there's the SmartDelete. So the next one I'm going to have a quick look at, guys, is the XRay tool. So the XRay tool here is to help identify why something possibly isn't displaying during the modeling process. Okay, so this scenario could be, well, maybe if someone's drawing in a plan, however, the actual instance is not displaying or it's not actually being drawn. So the X-ray there will help us identify the reason behind. Say, for instance, if the view ranges come into play, whether the category is turned off or turned on, or up to another 53 different possibilities as to why that element is not displaying in that view. Okay, so I've actually already gone through, guys, and I have set up a particular plan over here that I'm going to use for my X-ray. Okay, so within this particular plan here, I'm going to go through and try to place a column. So I'm activating the structure tool, column command over here, and I'm going to say, for instance, maybe drop there, maybe a 530 UV. Now I might drop it at this particular intersection point. Created within this particular plan, that being the columns in here, is actually displaying. So it's already given me the prompts. Now what the X-ray tool is going to allow me to do is give me a bit more of a reason, a bit more of a context of why this is actually not displaying. Because as we know, the hardest part about trying to select an element that is not as visible is actually the selection process. Okay, so this tool is going to help us. So the way this tool actually works is we know that we've placed it rather close to that particular grid there. what this tool offers is, as we fire it up over here, is the ability to try find it. So I'll wait until this tool pops up. Sorry guys, my Revit's having a bit of a moment this morning. Okay, so this particular tool has the ability for us to have a different selection method based on obviously whether it's 3D, 2D, or even levels, grids, and view references as well. Okay, so obviously that it's being a column, it is of a 3D nature. So we're going to use the 3D tool in here. We're actually even going to go through and search for a particular area within the target view. So by hitting next in here, I can then do a selection by the crossing window and do a crossing window rather close to where that column was actually placed in there. Now, by going through and doing that crossing window, you can see it's now displayed all the possible options below in the list over here. And if I scroll up to the very top, I can actually identify those two columns that I had just recently placed in there. So by now going through and selecting those two columns, I can hit the next feature in there. And if I was to go straight through and hit the find element, it's going to go through all those different 55 different reasons why it potentially could not be showing. And for instance here, it's actually showing me it's actually hidden by the category itself. So if I was to hit the more information here, it's actually going to give us a little bit more of a detailed description of actually how to go through and change that as well. So as you can see, the help field feature is actually really intuitive as well. It's very handy. It's actually going through and telling me it's to do with your view and the category, so the VG visibility graphics, and that particular category of potentially structural columns has been actually turned off. Okay, so if I was to close that down, to turn this on, rather than having to go to the VG and turn off, you can simply actually hit fix. And if I was to hit the fix, it says, as you can see right there, would you like to zoom into the area where the selected elements exist? Sure. I'm going to go through and it'll zoom into where those two columns are actually placed, turn that category back on for us, and as you can see, those columns are now actually displaying. So it's a very, very handy tool when you are trying to go through a model and you're finding that certain things are not turning on, you're receiving certain areas. So another one, for instance, is your view range, a very, very common area. You might be trying to model a trench, maybe for instance, and your view range is currently set maybe to only 500 millimeters below your slab. You're trying to draw that trench at the very bottom of the trench. That might be 1200 deep. You draw the floor doesn't show up. Okay, you can do this particular 3D test again to help identify why that actual floor is not showing up. So view range is probably one of those ones that usually gets a lot of new users as well. Okay, so this is a very, very handy tool helping evaluate why that has actually occurred. So now another great example of actually using this particular tool as well is we have in here a building section that I know is of a structural nature. However, it's actually not showing up on my GA plan. So if I go to my GA over here, I cannot see my actual structural section in here. Okay, so with the XRay tool, not only can you use it to search for 3D, as I mentioned before, you can also do it to search for 2D and also view and levels and view references as grids, sorry, as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the pick from list option when it comes to the view references and hit next. Now I know that section is actually called the building section. So using the search feature at the very top here, I'm going to go through and start typing in the word building section that I can actually see on my project browser and go through and select it. Now by selecting it, I then hit next, okay, and then I go find element. Now by going through and finding the elements, actually giving me a bit of a reason here to say that actually it's the view discipline that is actually controlling the reason why I cannot see it. Okay, so the reason why that is I have a architectural section, which you can actually see over here. Sorry, I have a building section that has accidentally been placed in the architectural discipline. So if I now simply go through, and yes, it's one of those dialog boxes you can have open at the same time, and switch it over to structural, bang, it now displays in my view there. So another great way in which we can use this particular XRay tool, guys. So now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the more information button here helps break down okay, and some of those steps. And if you're not very familiar with the Revit interface over here or what you actually need to change, okay, so there is a very, very extensive help library in regards to all those 55 different reasons why that the XRay tool actually does check. Okay, so if you are unsure of how to change any of it, if the fixed spelling, for instance, has actually not displayed, that help area is very, very handy, guys. So by all means, jump up and bring up the more information, review the steps, go through, make those changes, and you can see in the very background there, it's actually gone through and complete that for me, which is very good. So, so that there is the XRay tool. Guys, we've only really touched the surface and what we can actually do with the XRay tool as well. There are so many other different scenarios that we can actually show you guys today, but I just want to go through sort of the most common that might actually occur in there. So moving forward, we're going to have a quick look at the renumbering tool. Now this one here is quite a very handy tool when it comes to actually updating numbers within a particular project, or even starting a numbering sequence. And I'm also going to touch on, well, how we actually approach that as well. So if I was to go through and open up that renumbering tool in here, we'll go through the actual dialog box itself. So, okay, so first thing you get when you open up this particular dialog box for the renumber is the rule itself will identify the possible options that you can currently do based on the view I actually have in front of me. So you can see it's either going to do the grids, columns, or the foundations that I can actually see. So we could also go through, if you really wanted to, and go through and create our own rules in there. So we might actually do so and create a very unique one for columns, for instance. So at the moment, I have the size of the column determined by my little SCBs over there, but I want to go through and individually mark those columns. Okay, so that could be for many different reasons. It could be for helping the guys out on site. We want to help identify the column in relation to where it is on site, or maybe from a QAing process with the engineers. The engineers find it a little bit easier when there's an individual markup against the column. So we're going to go through and create our new renaming rule in here. And we're going to base on structural columns. Okay. And I'm just going to put the word A2K at the very end there. So we're going to create a unique one for structural columns for A2K. Now, the way in which this works is we're looking for a particular parameter to add that information into. And as you can see, I've actually got the option there to add in the location mark, comments, or the mark. Generally speaking, most people will be aiming straight for the mark in there. Okay, so you also do have the option to ignore some parameters if you wish. Now, say for instance, being that these are of a structural column nature, I might say that, well, maybe my prefix in regards to my individual number against my column there needs to be SC. So I've got the option here when I'm building my rule or my definition for tagging those individual columns in here. I can add in a constant, an increment, or a particular field. So let's go through and add a constant, being an SC, structural column, drop that in there, and I'm going to add in my particular increment. So this here is going to be my numbering sequence, and the starting value is going to be 1. Okay, so you can do an increments per types of elements as well, levels, spaces, rooms, if we're going to start looking at renumbering doors, windows, etc. Okay, so I'm keeping it nice and simple from a structural aspect, and I'm going 1 in there. Now, if I have a look down the very bottom here, it's actually giving me a bit of a preview in regards to what the result will be when I use this tool. So if we're quite happy with the way that rule has actually been put together, we can save and close that now. And our rule now has been dropped into our rules list. Okay, so by default, when you do get the Ideate renumber, there is already half a dozen to almost over a dozen, different rules that the team has already put together for particular scenarios in there. Okay, so they've gone through and provided a few templates, you could say. There is absolutely no reason why, as well, guys, that these could be exported and imported in between different projects. Okay, so if you've gone through and started for one project and bring it to another, you definitely can. Or even a more smarter approach is you could actually bring these into your Revit template as well. Okay, so you do this once, you export them out, you bring them into your Revit template. They're there for future use in every single new project that you create, providing that you start from your new Revit project, new Revit template in there. Okay, so you can come up with a consistent approach of how this will actually be done. Okay, so you're not having to reinvent the wheel every project, which is great. So now selecting the structural column particular tool here, I'm going to go through and activate it, and you can see it's already prompted me with the example it's going to start with. Now, there are a couple of different methodologies in how to actually renumber. Okay, so we've got the first instance I'm going to show you, which is just going through and selecting all the visual columns manually. And I'm going to show you how we can also speed up that using some of these cross and vertex. And ultimately, I'm also going to show you how you can do an automation as well. So the selection method here of the select instance is pretty straightforward. I'm going to go start through a number, and I'm simply going through and clicking. That's okay in there. And I'll just do it for those 4 in there. So you can see it's going through 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's been updated in there. Now the alternative option we've got here is actually creating a path. So I'm going to do this manually today. Now, if I was to go through it and create a crossing path in here, I'm going to start that increment now at 5. Being that is my next column number, and then start numbering. All we need to do, guys, is actually go through and using my draw tool in here, go across, go draw from left to right. I might even then come back down and go from left to right again against those columns, and then the very, very last row of columns in here. I've drawn my particular cross over here. I'll come back, and if I just hit escape, you can see it's actually changed it over to a red line there. Okay, that helps indicate the particular path. All right, and it's also given me a preview of what the results will be. Okay, so you can see if you really wish, you could go identify the individual element ID there and go search for it to help identify it. But you can see my particular path is more of a zigzag shape in here to help go from left to right. At any point in time as well, if you've realized that maybe, for instance, maybe that column over here, which is my 3rd one, is actually of a mullion, okay, you can ignore it, okay? So that means that it will ignore that particular column, but rename the rest of them. All right, now there is an option there to zoom into that particular element to check it as well. There's also an option there to reverse it if it's accidentally been drawn back to front as well as that, guys. So now by hitting the accept changes, it has gone through and populated that through for us. So I accidentally selected the wrong column, but you can see it's ignored that column on the right-hand side. So that there is using our crossing path there. So now the other instance I'm going to show you guys is, say for instance, if we have an architecture model, how we can renumber some of our doors, and that's using the auto number by view down over here. So I'm just going to close that down for a quick second and switch over to a new project. This one here being the Autodesk out of the box project here. So I'm going to now fire up the Renumber tool. And in this case, I'm focusing purely on doors here. So using the rule for the doors, I'm going to use the auto number by the view feature here. Now what that's going to help me do is renumber these doors based in regards to the actual room. Now if I have a quick look at the settings in regards to this particular door here, you can see it's going to help identify this particular room number. So say for instance, in to my cafeteria over in the top left-hand corner here, you can see I have a door just below it. It's going to utilize that particular number. And when I fire this back up, sorry guys, and go back to its settings over here, it's going to be looking for that particular room number and then put a suffix there for me in regards to that -A. So knowing that what that rule is going to do, I'm going to use the auto number rule, hit the start numbering. And as you can see, where it has a possibility that it might have 1 or 2 doors associated to that room, it's going to put a suffix there of either A or B. Okay, and that's going to do it from, I believe, from top to bottom, left to right. Okay, so in regards to where it sits in relation to the project. So now if I accept that change, so you can actually see, sorry, before I accept that change, that all the green ones are the ones that are going to be changed, okay? So as you can see, room 18 possibly only has one door, as we can actually see, so that way it's actually ignored. Now by hitting accept changes in there, it's gone through, and if I now go review, maybe for instance that room 101 over here, you can see that yes, I have two individual doors. I don't know why that one popped up, sorry guys. I have two individual doors associated with room 101, and they now have a suffix of A and B, which is very, very handy. So that there is the alternative way, guys, of using that auto feature. Now, guys, again, this is one of those tools we've only really just scratched the surface in regards to its particular use. Okay, so further to what I've just shown you, you can also actually use this tool to help, you can also use this tool when you have linked files as well. So if you had a linked architectural file within your MEP model, you can use this in a way that you can also help maybe from identifying the room number that the architectural file has to help identify what the sprinkler number may be in regards to the one that sits in that room, if that's a way in which you want to place your numbers. So we're looking at now just from a current project that is live with no links, but there's absolutely no reason why we can't dig into that data in behind linked files as well. Okay, so if you guys want any further questions in regards to that, please don't hesitate to ask. Rich is definitely here to help as well. Okay, so as I said, we've only just touched the surface for Renumber. That tool is very, very handy. Okay, key thing is, guys, all your different rules you can predetermine and set up, and by all means add to your Revit template for your company as well, okay, for use in all your future projects. Okay, now the next apps we're going to jump into. So I just been a bit time cautious here to make sure I'll leave enough time for the questions afterwards. Is the next app we're going to look into, guys, is the QAing process that we can do within the Revit environment. Okay, that being the SpellCheck and the SheetManager. And within the SheetManager, I'll touch on the align, clone, and view creators in there, okay? Now, as you can see, the actual tools that I just said in regards to the SheetManager have their own individual button, okay? But I find SheetManager a really, really handy tool that you can actually do all of them in the same process. Okay, now before I get to the SheetManager, I just want to quickly touch on what the SpellCheck can offer here. And what I will do, guys, is I'll just leave it in that view. Okay, now with this SpellCheck, you've got a couple of different options there. I think I mentioned a little bit earlier as well, is we can do a SpellCheck on the current views that we actually have open in this particular project, all the sheets if I have a sheet in there, or I could do the sheets. As you can see, as it's asking for the sheets and the sheet list, all those schedules. Okay, so as we probably would know, the SpellCheck with Revit is quite difficult to use. You generally have to have either the sheet open or the view within the sheet open to really use that tool. Okay, I've always found in the past it's very, very difficult to actually use. So this tool is sort of making this a lot easier in comparison. Okay, so for instance, I'm going to go through and actually check all my sheets and my sheet list there, and also make sure I'm using British English here as well, and run that SpellCheck. And as you can see, it's already picked up a couple of different spellings already. So the vapor in here, it probably does need to actually use. So I'm going to go through there and change that. I might say that dampening proof. Yeah, sure, let's make that capitals, and let's just go ignore all. Okay, so once that SpellCheck has actually been complete, as I said, it goes through all the views on the sheets. It can check the schedules as well if there is schedules on that particular sheet. For instance, there was no schedules there. It's told me it's checked 15 different options. I've modified 2. And ultimately, at the end of the day, guys, you can send this out as a report as well. So if you wanted to, you could have this as a text report. It's already given me a date stamp as well as the time, being 11:40 today. So you can use this as a bit of a reviewing tool as well, and keep track to see if that tool has actually been used, which is very, very handy. So here we go. So here are those 2 different IDs that we actually changed in there. Perfect. So that there is the spelling tools. So very, very handy. Key thing, guys, all the views on the sheets as well as the schedules, and you can either do a specific sheets or views that you actually have open, or you can do the entire project set. Okay, very, very easy way to check the spelling. So that's the spelling tool there. The next one I'm going to jump into is the SheetManager. So this is a tool I actually is quite neat in the way in which the team has put this together. Okay, so within this particular area here, it is displaying on the left-hand side essentially all the views associated to my project and the current sheets on the right in there. Okay, so as we know, the project browser can be quite difficult sometimes when you have a couple of hundred views. All right, so this particular area here makes it a bit easier to help navigate. Now, one of the real neat features I actually quite like about this is there is the button straight away to help identify which views have already been placed on sheets. As we know, we cannot have more than one view on a sheet, sorry, the same view on multiple sheets. So it's a very, very handy tool to help identify straight away and turn off those ones that have already been done. Okay, so now one thing I'm going to mention right here, now as I have already gone through and I've actually used BIM Link, which we're going to touch on a little bit this afternoon, to actually set up some of the placeholders for new sheets that I'm going to create within the SheetManager, okay? So keep that in mind when I'm using this particular tool. Now what I mean by that is when I hit new sheet here, I'm just going to cancel that. Oh, sorry, I need to switch into another project. Apologies, guys. Let's switch into my architectural project over here. Okay, I'm going to fire up the SheetManager again. So within this particular file, I've gone through and used BIM Link to basically create a set of placeholders in here, okay? Yes, you can create new objects using BIM Link, which I'm very excited about, so we'll go through that after the rest of these QA tools. Okay, so by hitting the new sheet within the SheetManager, I can go through and select those placeholders, nominate the particular sheet size, and hit OK. Okay, and it'll go through in the background and create all my new sheets for me. Now, what makes this SheetManager very, very handy when you're putting a lot of sheets together is the fact that you don't have to then jump into that sheet to drag and drop the view on there. You can actually do it live straight through this particular SheetManager. Again, it's also one of those tools you can actually be working in the background if you wish. Okay, so if there's further information you need to add or attach to that sheet. Now, what I'm going to do, guys, is go through and drag and drop the view that is associated to that particular sheet. So you can see it's going through and dragging those views in there. I'm going to do that for these three sheets. Now, one thing I might add, very heavily focused on the structural engineers who might be a part of this webinar, is the way in which we create views so we can show load bearing under. Generally speaking, we try to have maybe 2 or 3 different views. That might be the case. Yes, if you drag and drop your view in a particular order, you'll actually see that nice load bearing view show up over the top of your current GA. Okay, so with that, it makes it a lot easier when we're trying to put together general arrangement views, top and bottom reinforcement, PT, you name it, shear tie drawings, okay? So you've got 6 or 7 different GA views for the same level. Can be very, very cumbersome when putting together manually. So this tool is very, very handy in speeding that process up. So now I've dragged and dropped those views onto those sheets there. Now, if I open up the level 1 in the very background, you can see that the level 1 view is actually isolated itself in the view on the sheet there nice and neatly. It's sort of very evenly placed on that sheet. If I was to jump to level the number 2 sheet here, you can actually see that view is actually span in the middle space, okay? So this is where the align tool comes into place. So if I open up the floor plan for 0 entry level here, and then activate the align tool over there, what I can do now is using that sheet and also the view attached to that sheet. So if you have multiple views, you can approach it this way too. I can now force the alignment for level 2, 3, and the roof to be identical. So when I hit align here, basically what we'll go through is go and open up that particular sheet, move it to the respective location that was the same as level 0, and drop it on there for me. Now, as I mentioned, it's not just for that GA view too. If you had multiple views on that sheet, guys, you can actually do it for maybe for your notes that you might have in the top right-hand corner, or even legends, etc. Okay, so you can use that to help line up all those different views. So you can imagine the amount of time that you would actually save using this process instead. So now another thing that we can actually do here within this particular SheetManager tool, and as I mentioned a little bit earlier, guys, like your view creator, your align, a new sheet, or sorry, not the new sheet, are all actual individual tools at the very top as well, okay? So if you actually want to do this in part processes, by all means you can, but it is definitely going to be a lot easier within this actual SheetManager box. Okay, now the other one I want to show you is actually the clone tool in here. Now this is a good way when you're actually trying to create for maybe, for instance, some QA drawings, okay? So the drawings that you don't want to maybe send out to the contractor or to the client or to the other consultants, but you want internally for yourself to help review well, what is actually going on in this particular project, okay? So rather than having to go through, duplicate the view, and then put it onto another sheet, that process can be very, very quickly done using this clone method down the very bottom here. So say, for instance, I want to create a working view for level 2 there. I can select it, hit this clone feature, and using the clone feature here, I can give a new sheet number. I might say it is SK, maybe for instance for sketching, and this is maybe O2 for level 2 here. I might even put a different name to the actual view itself. I might say it's actually called a working floor plan. Okay, so I also do have the option in there with the viewport options to select the viewport settings for the new sheet. So the existing sheet was using level 2.0 floor plan. I could actually have another view in there if I actually really wished. In this case, I'm just more interested in the new sheet. So I'm going to go clone over here, drop that down and go okay. Now the view itself, okay, so I've actually named that sheet there. The view itself that we may want to duplicate, I will then come back, guys, and selecting my floor 2 over here, I then go through and use that view creator tool. Now this is a very, very handy tool. Okay, so this particular view creator, obviously the view already exists, so I might as well just use that duplicate feature rather than creating a brand new plan for the level. All right, so I'm more interested in going through and duplicating the view. Okay, so it's giving me a bit of an example of what actually is going to occur here. Sorry guys, let me just double check, make sure I've selected it. There we go. Okay, so using a duplicate view, I can then assign a particular rule. Okay, well, what is it going to duplicate? How's it going to name it? Is there a view template associated to it, etc., etc.? Okay, so if I jump into the rules here in regards to this view creator, it's very similar to like the renumbering. Okay, we can go through and set basically what is its definitions. Okay, so by hitting new over there, I'm going to create a brand new rule. And this here is going to be for my working views. Okay, so using this working view, I might add in a constant here, and that constant is going to be called working first. I'm going to place it at the very front of it, and the field I might say, for instance, is actually the name, the level name itself. Okay, so we're working hyphen level 2. So if I have a quick look, perfect, so that's popped up over there. Now, whilst you're actually doing this, you can also have on the right-hand side over here some differences in the properties it's originally duplicating it from. So let me just make sure I got duplicate view ticked on over there. So what might be a bit of a different instance from the original GA view that might have a view template that is forcing it to a GA is, by all means, you could have a separate template that might be now forcing it to a working view instead. So just for instance, and for the sake of this particular test here, I'm going to change that to an architectural plan instead. If you wished it to prompt you as you're doing it, by all means tick it on, but we're going to force it instead. So let's leave it as the architectural plan and save and close. Now, finding that in the list, we grab our working view, go OK. Okay, so there we force our particular rule now. Go to our select view. We've got our level 2 in here. And I probably will duplicate it with the detailing because I wouldn't mind having the tags, the notes, etc., just so I can see how the drawing was originally put together. And going next, it's going to name it as per our working 02 floor over here, create that particular view. Perfect, it's created that view for me. I can drag and drop that onto my sheet. Go to an existing plan that already has in the correct location, and hitting my line tool, align my working sketching sheet now to it, align, going done, and then closing this down. I've now put together my sketch sheet very, very quickly. Okay, so one of those things, like I mentioned with the Renumber, is that view creator, okay, and its rules can also be exported out and imported and ultimately saved to your Revit template at the end of the day as well, guys. Okay, so a lot of these can be all set up, predefined, and when a project is put together, and I'm going to show you the BIM Link side of it right now too, is you can run the BIM Link, run these view creators, and ultimately the sheet set up. And we know how long that can take within Revit manually, so they'll speed up that workflow tenfold. So now to end this webinar, guys, I'm going to quickly show you what BIM Link can offer in here as well. Okay, so BIM Link allows us to actually dive very deep within the premise and the data within Revit itself. Okay, so it goes a lot further than schedules. Big hint. All right, so we can actually get into things behind the scenes like coordinates or any other additional sort of parameters that we can't naturally get through schedules. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the structural model here, and I'm going to show you very quickly how we can create that sheet list. Okay, so firing up BIM Link over here on the left-hand side of my Ideate software tools, I'm going to create a brand new link, and that link is going to be looking for sheets. Sorry. Okay, so I'm creating a brand new sheet. Okay, I might call that BIM Link Sheets and V18 for its particular version in there. There are a couple already pre-existing sample links we can use as a bit of a template with creating our BIM Link in there. Now, the beauty of BIM Link is if you already have pre-existing schedules set up with certain information there, you can utilize them or you can create your own ones, okay? Now, I'm going to utilize the current sample link of sheet in here, and the reason for that is when I go next, it's going to show me a lot of critical information about my sheet. So at the moment, it's listing the current sheets associated to the project and a few of their respective values in here. Now, as I mentioned before, it gets a lot further into the background than naturally what schedules can do. And for instance here, it is actually allowing me to pick up even some of the project information that you can tuck onto sheets. Okay, so it's also a great way to help fill out that information without having to go find the button in Revit. All right, so it is looking for a lot more data in the background in comparison to what schedules can accomplish. Okay, so big thing to point out. Now, it's listed the current information, as you can see. More importantly to me is the appearance sheet list, the sheet number, and the sheet name to get the ball rolling, okay? It's also got the issue date, etc. But going done in here, I can then export that out. Okay, I'm going to drop that just here somewhere, and it will allow me to open the file. Now, what we can do when we're in Excel here is actually create more sheets. Okay, so I'll wait for this to pop up. All right, so I'm going to go through and add a couple more sheets in here. I might just do 2 or 3 very, very quickly. Neat little trick, if you add the word new, it's going to create a brand new sheet with its own individual element ID. Okay, so now we all know the power of using Excel for that functionality, as well as things like VLOOKUP, concatenating. You name those type of tools that help, or you might have a specific drawing numbering system that you need to abide by based on that certain project. You bring Excel into play, as we know, we can very, very quickly come up with the sheet list that we actually require for the project. And by using BIM Link, we can, as you can see, very quickly bring that into the actual project itself. So I'm just going to quickly put in some different scenarios. I might just say ground floor, level 1, and then roof in here. Providing that you put in the word true, it will actually automatically display it within sheet list. Okay, so I'm going to just ignore the sheet and the drawn by for the time being, close that down, I'm going to re-import it here, open it up, and in this dialog box, it's going to tell me where those new ones exist, and as you can see, it's already given it a new ID as well. Okay, so going import now, closing that down. Now, it doesn't automatically generate the sheets. This is where the SheetManager comes into play, okay? So we could now fire up the SheetManager, go create new sheet. I'm not going to save this. Grab our new sheets, our respective title block, push those out, and then ultimately I could then drag and drop those views onto those sheets, and I can very, very quickly, guys, as you can see, put an entire sheet list together and sheet set together, sorry. So that's one feature of many, many different uses of BIM Link that we can actually use here, guys, okay? So I think what I'll do is now leave it open to questions, guys, knowing that we're only got about 4 or 5 minutes left. So if you'd like to ask any questions, please, by all means, the chat box is open. So it looks like, I think everyone...
Yeah, there are no questions so far.
Yeah, no, that's good. So maybe I might expand on some of the other workflows of BIM Link whilst I've got everyone here for a couple of more minutes. So another use that we could actually use it for, guys, is actually extracting out, maybe for instance, all the rafter sizes that might be associated to the project. Okay, so I've got a warehouse roof framing layout over here. Okay, I could use BIM Link to extract out all those current rafter sizes in this project, spit it out to Excel, and then using Excel, I can get the engineers to go through, update their respective sizes in regards to where that rafter might occur in the project. By updating the BIM Link, I can push that back into Revit, and I'll actually go through and update the physical geometry as well as that particular rafter in there and all its associated data. Okay, so you can definitely use BIM Link in quite a few different ways. So now there is a question here by Elsa. Does the numbering system recalculate when adding or deleting items? So Richard, I think you might be able to help expand a little bit further on that question.
Yeah, as long as the line, for instance, when he used the renumbering by path method, you can pick the path, and if the new item is within that path, then it would pick that up and you could renumber. But basically, it's if you're adding elements, you'll have to go through and renumber either by path or by the auto view. So it's not automatically, as you add new things, it's not keeping track of that. But you can easily, like I said, go back and renumber based on that path.
Perfect. Thank you, Richard. Excellent. Anyone else got any further questions they'd like to share before we wrap up this webinar? Excellent. All right. Well, if that's the questions for today, guys, thank you very much for jumping on during your lunchtime and watching this webinar about the Ideate software, in particular the apps and BIM Link. Thank you very much for attending, guys, and thank you, Richard, for being here as well, mate. I appreciate that. All right. Thank you.